Moving forward, what is the right decision at quarterback for Coach Elko and Texas A&M? That's the conversation on today's episode of Locked On Aggies.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. On the show today, we're going to talk a little bit about why Texas A&M having both running backs play well the rest of the year is going to be huge for this team. We're going to talk about why South Carolina is not a joke, and this game is going to be a massive one. But we're going to start the show talking a little bit about quarterback. This is just the reality, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this week, we're going to have multiple discussions about the quarterback position because it's been such a revolving door. It's going to play a crucial role for what happens the rest of the year for Texas A&M. And, you know, looking at this position, this has been a really weird season at quarterback for Texas A&M. We've seen games where Connor Rigman plays great. We've seen games where Marcel Reed plays great. Marcel Reed, of course, and his legs win you the game, in essence, against LSU in the most important game of the year so far. Marcel Reed's legs were the difference. Connor Rigman wasn't getting it done through the air. Coach Elko makes the move to Marcel Reed, and it ends up being a genius move by the head coach of the Aggies. And in all honesty, probably wins this team the game. Looking at the rest of the season, here's where I'm a little bit concerned. I would say the one thing that has been consistent for Texas A&M this year at the quarterback position has been Marcel Reed's legs. Hasn't been Connor Rigman's arm, hasn't been Connor Rigman's legs, hasn't been Marcel Reed's arm. It's been Marcel Reed's legs. That has been a consistent. It always works out well. He always does a good job moving the football with his legs. Now, here's the deal. I think that a lot of people are going to feel confident that Marcel Reed is going to be the guy going forward. And I don't know if I think that's the case. Now, I'm not saying I don't think that should be the case. What I'm saying is I have a feeling that Elko and company might go back to Wigman. Now, I think we're going to find a lot out in the press conference. That is when we're going to learn. We're going to get some more quotes about the plan going forward. So likely we'll break down quarterback again on the show tomorrow. But I have a feeling that Wigman might be the guy going forward. And that's not, I'm not saying that's what I believe should happen. I'm going to get into what I believe should happen. But I just have a feeling that's what's going to happen. And I know I've seen, so here, let's do this. Let's read some comments from our postgame show yesterday and talk a little bit about what everyone had to say about who should be the quarterback. So we had somebody said, if Reed fixes his passing accuracy, then he's QB1. However, if accuracy is still an issue, then the QB will most likely be situational for the rest of the season. That is, I think, one of the best ways you can sum up this quarterback position for Texas A&M. I think that is so accurate. Now, Reed's arm, obviously, I mean, in this game, he was 2-2 for 70 yards. In basically a half a football, Reed was the quarterback, and he only threw the football 2 times. Reason being, and Reed talked about this after the game, the way they were kind of crashing on the running backs, the way they were playing defense, it made his legs the valuable weapon. It's why the Aggies were able to score 4 touchdowns and win this football game. His legs ended up being the difference in this game. Someone else said that, Reed is the answer for the offense. Someone, and to be fair, person who said that has been saying that for a while. So kudos to them for knowing, hey, Reed's going to come in and help in this. Someone says, basically, Marcel Reed's not a huge quarterback when it comes to weight. You'll need him and Connor, and they'll need lots of guys to be ready. I'm fair. I'm okay with that. Someone says, I wouldn't give up on Connor because they will need him in games. So you need to get a spark on offense, just like basically what happened with Marcel Reed. I mean, here's my issue. I am not someone who loves the quarterback switching all the time thing. You know, we saw that back in the day in Florida. We've seen Auburn do it at times. I've watched. I was watching that Kentucky Auburn game, and even Kentucky was doing that. Like, I've seen a lot of, we've seen this before, and it never seems to be too successful. And I'll give you an example. I was watching the Kentucky game the other day, and I've watched them once before. I watched their game against Ole Miss. So I watched them play twice. Their starter is that Vandegrift kid, and he's more their passer. And then their backup is Wimsat, I believe is his name, and he is their running guy. And when watching that Auburn-Kentucky game, I was watching that, I have a lot of friends in Kentucky games, so I'm watching the Aggies we have a 2 TV setup in the house, so I have one game up top, one game on the bottom. And I would watch Kentucky bring in the Wimsat quarterback for a snap, and then every time he came in, I think he ended up taking over as the quarterback at the end of the game, like for good. But when he was coming in while Vandegrift was still the guy there, he was only in there to run the football. And Auburn knew what was going to happen, and they couldn't get anything going, whether it was an option and he gave it to the running back or that quarterback kept it. Auburn was ready for it. So what I'm saying is the answer to go with a full-on switch between Wigman and Marcel Reed throughout the game? I just am not a huge fan of that. The problem is different teams, different games call for different options at quarterback. Some games you're going to need Wigman's arm, although once again, he did not have a great game throwing the football. Some games you're going to need Wigman's arm. Some games you're going to need Marcel Reed's legs. Now, one thing I could get behind drives, but I just am not a fan of Connor Wigman's driving the ball, but let's bring in Marcel Reed. I'm not a huge fan of that. Some people are. Some people like that, and I get it. I mean, it's worked before in college football, but I just am not a massive fan of that approach to the quarterback position. So, looking at this, what is the right decision for Mike Elko in this team? And I'll tell you, and the reason I lean toward Reed just a hair, and I'll tell you why. And those of you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies, I've been back and forth, and I think everybody in the comments it's been tough. I mean, this has been weird. This is one of the more weird quarterback situations we've seen in college football in a long time. But looking at the way this has worked itself out, I think that what makes the most sense for Texas A&M might be Marcel Reed, simply because I talked about what has been the one consistent in this quarterback room, and that has been his legs. Knowing that, and also knowing that Texas A&M wants their identity to be to run the football. Once again, they ran the ball 49 times against LSU. They want to run the ball. They want to run the rock. That's what they want to do. So knowing that's the case, maybe Marcel Reed makes the most sense. Maybe it makes the most sense to let him run the football. Maybe it makes the most sense because here's the deal. If Marcel Reed's your starter going forward, I don't see Texas A&M throwing the football more than 18 times, if that, in all honesty. And you can kind of do a thing where his legs and the legs of your running backs will open up opportunities to where maybe he doesn't need to be as accurate of a passer because he's going to have a lot of open receivers because they're selling out to stop the run. So maybe that is the answer. Maybe Connor Wigman, once again, it did feel like in the past. I didn't love the game plan when it came to how Connor Wigman was handled. I just thought that I don't think that he was helped a ton in that game. And he could have been better, could have been more accurate, but I don't think he was helped a ton in that game. So what do you do going forward? We'll probably, once again, break this down again tomorrow before we fully get into South Carolina. We're going to talk about South Carolina here a little bit here in a second. But I mean, the quarterback is the most important position on the field. If you don't have a good quarterback, if you have problems at quarterback, it's hard to win. Texas A&M's continued to find a way, despite some good quarterback play some games and bad quarterback play some games. But what happens with this quarterback room going forward is going to be really interesting. But I feel like I kind of lead toward the one thing that's been consistent, and that's Marcel Reed's legs, knowing Texas A&M wants to run the rock. We'll find out. But I also, like I said, I wouldn't be one bit surprised if they did stick with Connor Wigman. That is going to be something we continue to talk about throughout the week and probably again on the show tomorrow. But right now, I want to talk a little bit about, hey, do not overlook the South Carolina team. And I'll tell you why coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Yesterday was, the whole National Tight Ends Day in the NFL. And what did I do? Me and my buddies did a little parlay of tight end touchdown scores, and it hit. And it was a fun day. And we only did that on FanDuel because it is the best place to wager on all sports. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So this South Carolina team is an interesting one. And, you go through their season. They beat Old Dominion in a close game where you kind of go, oh, man, they beat Old Dominion by 4 points. Goodness gracious. Then they go to Lexington and steamroll Kentucky. Then they host game day where they play LSU, and they keep it really close. They only lose to LSU by 3 points. They then steamroll Akron 50-7. They then get, it was an ugly, ugly game against Ole Miss, losing that one 27-3. Then they go on the road to Alabama and lose by 2 points, 25-27. And then last week, not last week, it was a bye week, excuse me. But then they find a way to take down Oklahoma 35-9. It was a weird weird week and a weird weird season for the Gamecocks top to bottom. So coming off the bye week, that's a positive for South Carolina. I feel like you always like teams a little bit who are coming off their bye week and have a home game. The key for Texas A&M is to not have a big win hangover. We see this in college football all the time. It's what happened to Alabama after beating Georgia. Then you go lose to Vandy. You do not want to have a big win hangover against South Carolina. I talked about it. With that win over LSU, all you have to do now is not shoot yourself in the foot against South Carolina and Auburn, and you're likely set up for, an SEC championship game and a college football playoff appearance. All you got to do is win those football games. So looking now at looking at how this is going to go for the rest of the year and looking at this South Carolina game, when you're competing for a college football playoff appearance, there's no such thing as a game that's not a must win. You have to beat South Carolina. You have to beat Auburn. And then against Texas, at that point, then you're probably locked into the playoff. What you'd like, that game against Texas then becomes, hey, if we win this game, we might be the top overall seed. You know what I mean? Like, that is why that game then becomes so valuable, because you probably already locked yourself in the playoff, but it's can you be one of the top 3, 4, whatever seeds? So that is going to be the goal, is to take down that then becomes the goal for that Texas game. But South Carolina, once again, they are a team that, I think Sellers is a solid quarterback. I don't think he's great. I think he's okay. I think that he can win you a football game. I think that they have, what I respect about this team is the way their defense played against Oklahoma. Look at this. They ran the football 41 times for 74 yards against Oklahoma. That's 1.8 yards per tote. And they found a way knowing that. And now they've only, so basically that means they had about, about around 250 yards of offense in essence. And they won this game 35-9. That's a testament to their defense, because once again, in this game, their defense did have had 2 defensive touchdowns. They had a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and they had a pick 6 for a touchdown. So you get 14 points flat out from your defense, which goes a long way too. And then you had a couple of offensive scores. You got a passing touchdown from Sellers and a rushing touchdown from Rocket Sanders, the Arkansas transfer. But this is a game, that from top to bottom is I'm a little bit concerned. I really am. I am more concerned. I don't love that they're coming off their bye week. They played a really solid game against Oklahoma, blowing them out of the water. This is a scary game to me. This really is a scary game to me, because you have a special season on the way if you're Texas A&M. And if you lose to South Carolina, is it over? No, you then have to win out. But if you lose to South Carolina, you're putting a lot more pressure on that Texas game. Not like there's not going to already be a ton of pressure knowing it's the revival of that rivalry. It's going to be a huge game. It's going to be one of the most exciting games we've seen in a long, long time. But still, looking at this game and looking at this game against South Carolina, this is one that you have got to be ready. For example, look at this. Right now, the line in Vegas is -3.5 in favor of the Aggies. This is not, then you go to ESPN's matchup predictor, right? The little thing that gives you just a percentage of who's going to win, right? Texas A&M 54%, South Carolina 46%. This is going to be a close game. You're on the road, Sandstorm, they're going to be fired up. It's a top 10 team coming into town. I don't see this being a game where Texas A&M absolutely blows South Carolina out of the water. I don't. I think that South Carolina is going to hang around in this game. Am I going to pick Texas A&M to win? Yes, I am. But I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be what's the over-under set at right now? The over-under set at 44. I think this is going to be a 21-24 type of affair. I don't think this is going to be a game where Texas A&M wins at 35-21 or wins at 42-17. I don't see it being a game like that. I think South Carolina is going to hang around. I think South Carolina is a solid, very solid football team that if you don't. So here's the deal. Texas A&M was able to go on the road against a Mississippi State team and play bad and win, right? You will not be able to do that against the South Carolina team. If you play the way that you did against Mississippi State against South Carolina, I think you lose by 2 touchdowns. That's the reality here. This game is not a joke. This is not a game that you can just say, they're 4-3. It's South Carolina. We're Texas A&M. We're 7-1. We don't care. This is not you cannot look at that game this way. This is a massive, massive game when it comes to the future of this team. It's a massive game. So you have got to find a way to go on the road and get this win. I am more concerned about South Carolina than I am Auburn. Now, one thing I've seen a lot of people comment on the show and say, talk about how bad Auburn is. I really think that you are heavily mistaken if people are underestimating this Auburn team. I think both of these South Carolina and Auburn games are tough ones. They're not going to be, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Texas A&M lose one of those games because I think both of these teams, knowing they're both road games, can win this type of game. So you have got to bring your best football in both of those games. But right now, we're more focused on this South Carolina game. You have got to bring your best showing. If you don't bring your best showing, I don't think Texas A&M wins this game. That's how serious this is. People are, I think, going to underestimate this game. People are going to say, well, we're fine. We'll be fine. This is not going to be a cakewalk type of football game. It's not. South Carolina is a solid team. The Aggies have got to be ready to try and go on the road and get the huge win. We're going to talk a little bit about why both running backs, in my opinion, need to play well the rest of the season for this team to be successful. We'll talk about what that means coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at GameTime. GameTime is the only place anyone should ever buy tickets to anything. Going to a concert with my dad here in a few weeks. Got another concert that I'm going to in a few weeks as well. And where did I get my tickets to both of those concerts? On the GameTime app. Where will I buy tickets to every football, basketball, baseball game I go to in my entire life? On GameTime. I love the GameTime app. I love how easy it is to use. I love how you can see what your seat looks like from the GameTime app. I love that feature. It makes it easier to buy great seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. Against LSU, Amari Daniels, I thought, played a great football game. 12 carries for 14 yards, or 12 carries, for 91 yards, 12 carries for 14 yards. That would not be a great game. 12 carries for 91 yards, 7.6 yards per tote, had a long carry, 28 yards. Then you look at Le'Veon Moss, 14 carries for 83 yards, 5.9 yards per tote, and 2 touchdowns. You know, we had talked about, there have been some games this year where this game definitely helped Amari Daniels' yards per carry number a lot. It's up to 4.7 now. You know, this year I've leaned toward Le'Veon Moss all year, and I still do lean toward Le'Veon Moss. But I also am starting more to, I think, appreciate the value that having a running back like Amari Daniels brings you. Having a running back who is able to give you, first of all, to give Le'Veon Moss a breather, and second of all, do that, and it's not like this huge drop-off and decrease in talent. Having a guy like Amari Daniels is super valuable to a team. Because, I mean, he's had some huge games this year. He didn't get in the end zone this game because, Moss got in twice. Reed got in 3 times. But he did a great job setting up some touchdowns. He had some huge runs in this game. He was a big part of the win. And having 2 running backs like that is extremely valuable. You don't want to just have one guy. I mean, it's okay to have, a bell cow. Here's our guy. This is our running back. But having a backup or a second string guy in Amari Daniels who's going to be able to help you and hey, if Le'Veon Moss needs a breather, Amari Daniels is able to come in and give him a breather, and you're not seeing a huge drop off in talent when that happens. That is extremely valuable to a football team. So if you're a Texas A&M fan, you were really happy with the way that Amari Daniels played in this game, because knowing Texas A&M is going to want to run the ball between 40 and 50 times, in all honesty, probably every game the rest of the season, especially if they stick with Marcel Reed as the guy at quarterback, which that'll be another interesting part of the week. But having both of your running backs playing high-end football, having both Amari Daniels and Le'Veon Moss playing good football at this point in the season is extremely important for this team. That was weird. Some random offer thing just pulled up on my computer. But having both of those guys play well is valuable for this team. And it will be the difference between wins and losses. You got to have multiple running backs. And I've been a huge Le'Veon Moss guy, as y'all every day here at Locked On Aggies know, but I've also understood the value that Amari Daniels brings you. You still have to have that backup running back in Amari Daniels. And, once again, Texas A&M has that in a guy who can come in, play valuable snaps for your team, and help you win football games. I was really happy with the way he played against LSU. And I think having performances like that from him, because he's going to get 10 to 12 to 13 to 14. He's going to get 10 to 15 carries a game, as is Le'Veon Moss. Le'Veon Moss probably more in that like 14 to 18 range, sometimes 20. They're going to get their carries. You want them to do the most with them. And in this game, Amari Daniels did that. And if he continues to do that, it will be extremely valuable for this football team throughout the course of the rest of the season. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Hope everyone's having a great Monday. Really appreciate y'all being here every day. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Helps the show a ton. I really, really appreciate y'all being here. Hope everyone has a great rest of their Monday, and we will see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Aggies.